Artists, now that we have painted our background, it's time to move on to the chameleon. And what you're going to want to do when you paint your chameleon is try to make it stand out a little bit from your background. And what I mean by that is if your background has blues and purples, you might not want to use those colors on the edges unless you want your chameleon to blend into the background. It's kind of up to you. So remember, when we paint, we need water to activate our paint. Remember, we're taking care of our brushes. And when you paint the same way that you did the tree and the leaves. We're doing that wet on dry. So I'm going to go ahead and start layering and painting. Remember to try your best to keep your paint inside of the lines. Because your background is dry now, you shouldn't have to worry about it blending or dripping into your background. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up this one color. Remember, when you're painting, before you switch colors, you need to clean your brush on your messy mat first, then wipe it on the sponge to get any extra paint off, and then get your fresh water before moving on to another color. Remember that this is going to really help keep our brushes nice and clean. So I'm going to continue painting. I want to remind you that if you're painting a wet area next to a wet area, those colors might blend together. And if you're okay with that, you can leave it. If it bothers you, remember to wait for the first area to dry before you add the second. One thing that we want to do is we're going to do a technique on our chameleon while our paint is wet. So once you finish laying down your base colors, I want you to add a few wet areas. So I can add a few areas of wet paint and maybe just a little bit of water. The key to this step is that you have some wet paper and wet paint, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to actually be sprinkling some salt right on top of that wet paint. So you're going to take just a fingerful and you're going to sprinkle it right on top of that wet paint. And what's going to happen is the salt is going to kind of soak up some of that paint, and eventually we will remove that salt when it's dry, and it will give us a really cool texture. We're only going to put the salt on that wet area, and you don't need to put it all over your chameleon. Just pick a spot where you maybe want it to have some little bumps or texture. If I want to add some more down here, I can, but the only thing that you have to make sure you have is that your paper and your paint are wet for the salt to stick and suck up some of that water. And we're actually going to leave this salt right on our paper while it sits on the drying rack.